I think that's a really important point that I think we'll get into more around the changing nature of what a journalist does and the amount of resources that journalists have at their disposal has declined significantly. You go back to the 50s and think about like these smoke-filled rooms and His Girl Friday and all these loud typewriters snapping in the background and everything. And there, I mean, it was a bit glamorized in those movies, but there was also an element of truth in that you could make a living as a newspaper journalist doing a story a day kind of thing. And it wasn't a great living, but it was a job that grew in status, I would say, during the 50s, 60s, maybe 70s, and then started declining after that. And, in terms of what the job of a journalist is, like the sort of high level idea of what they're doing, I think about the word itself, and they're kind of, some journalists like to refer to it as the first draft of history, right? And this idea that they're getting down what's happening and they're sharing it with their audience, with the people who need to know it. But it gets complicated when you have columnists or, panels and those kinds of things where they do commentary. And the idea behind those are you have experts who can take the facts as they have been delivered by the reporters, and they can give you context and meaning behind what's going on. That's sort of a definition and probably an ideal because there's so many things that get in the way of doing that kind of thing. The profit motive being an important piece of that. And we talk about clickbait a lot these days, what'll get clicks, but you know, they used to complain 40 years ago about, oh, you're just writing this story to sell newspapers, right? So
Yeah.
the the money, the profit motive hasn't changed, just the means of making money has
Mm.
changed. That part has changed a lot. And also I think the quality of journalism has slipped because the business impact of social media to news.
I mean, it's kind of their fault. I mean, they went on the internet for free. There's something also like fundamentally
Yes.
at odds with a hyper capitalist environment like this and journalism existing because there is like fundamentally, and every journalist thinks this, like information should be free, but I need to get paid, and the government's not going to pay me, and you're not going to pay me, and no one else is going to pay me, and I'm going to starve to death, so I have to now go get a different job, and now I make TikToks. So you know,
Yeah.
it's but we also are at like such a desperate point of society. Like, does any job pay the bills? You kind of have to have two.
Well,
Right?
and on that note, can we talk about that? Because nowadays, most people would not consider paying for the news. Like in the past, people would pay for a newspaper to be delivered to their house, or they'd watch television and the advertisers would end up paying for the news. But now, because of the internet, like Alexa, like you said, people expect news to be free. So let's get a little philosophical here for a second. Can we talk about the cost of the idea that information should be free? Like, what has this cost society?
Yeah, lives, everything. How many people
Um,
have died for that?
Died for.
Like whistleblowing, revealing information, pushing for like leaking documents, changing anything, going against, putting anything. That was one of the quotes that what journalism used to be, and that made sense. I think it was Orwell said it. Journalism is publishing something that somebody doesn't want to be published, and that's not
Mm.
true anymore either. I don't agree with that either. Like I used to be really dedicated back when I was, bright eyed and full of piss and vinegar. In journalism school, I was really into this idea of solutions journalism. It was the idea that all of your news, so like for every story you have, let's say you have a story of like originally in the news, you would make it as what clickbait is like try to provoke an emotional reaction from somebody because then they're going to click on it. The idea with solutions journalism is that, let's say the story is like there's 20 million tons of food waste from grocery stores in the US every year. Traditional journalism would focus on that and how devastating it is, what the terrible impacts are. Solutions journalism, you would cover that in the first 25% of the article, but then the other 75% would have to focus on the grocery stores that have figured out how to cut that in half this year. The grocery store that has figured out how to divert waste with this. You focus on the community responses, not necessarily framing them like they're going to work or they definitely will solve any issue, but it was a way to avoid getting like John Krasinski in the pandemic started that like, oh, it's good news. And like,
right.
Yeah. That's great. Cute. I mean, like I can just watch TV if I want. Like it was a sweet idea, but it wasn't as constructive as pushing it into that. Like it's hard in terms of like information being free. We had learned this quote when I was in journalism school. I totally forget, but it was some story from way back when the day that the first newspaper made a profit, the like CEO or whatever it was of the paper, or like the head, or not CEO, sorry, the editor-in-chief, the EIC, like put the paper down and he was like, now journalism is dead. As soon as it made a profit. Because it wasn't supposed to be that. It was supposed to have the same deal as the churches do and still do, where if you're providing a public service that the government doesn't provide, we'll give you a little bit of a kickback and we'll either support you through tax cuts or something else. But government has totally turned their back on journalism. Completely. Everybody has. It should be free, but I should be able to make a living by devoting my life to getting you that information. If I can, then what's the point of any of it?